The CT-X700's preset songs are a great starting point for any new piano student, but as I've mentioned before, you can also expand the built-in library with up to 10 user MIDI song files of your choosing. The wide compatibility of the MIDI format has made it a common fixture in the world of electronic musical instruments for decades now, and as a result, a quick internet search is all it takes to find plenty of free MIDI song transcriptions ranging from pop tunes to classical etudes to piano practice drills. Combining this huge collection of MIDI files with the onboard lesson features makes it easy to personalize your own piano practice regimen. But in order to ensure that these imported files are fully compatible with all of Lesson Mode's features, you may need to tweak a few settings on the keyboard beforehand. Depending on how the MIDI file is structured, it may work perfectly with the lesson features right away. But if you're having trouble with a particular file, the steps outlined in this video should help you get everything up and running. Before moving on, I'm going to assume that you already have a MIDI song imported and that you also have a solid understanding of how Lesson Mode works, but if that's not the case, you can always refer back to previous videos in this series to get yourself up to speed. In one of those previous videos, I imported this simple C major scale exercise as an example, so I'll choose that song from the list and then start lesson playback with both the left and right hand parts selected for practice. If you remember our discussion of the lesson features back in part 2 of this series, I bet you immediately noticed that some things are a bit off. For starters, none of the display features are following along with the scale parts. And if I tried disabling the left or right hand parts for isolated practice, nothing seems to be happening in terms of parts being muted for playback or showing up on the display, and so on. Both of these problems are a result of the way this particular scale drill was originally recorded, specifically with regards to the MIDI channels that were assigned to the left and right hand parts. Some quick background here, a MIDI sequence can contain note data on up to 16 separate channels running at the same time, allowing musicians to create more dense and complex compositions by having each channel play a different part and use a different tone when doing so. Casio's step-up lesson features work by monitoring 2 of these 16 possible channels, one for the left-hand part and another for the right-hand part. Assigning these 2 channels properly will isolate only the notes for one or both of the hands you've chosen for practice, and allows the staff and keyboard displays to update accordingly for additional visual feedback. The factory preset songs have all been set up with this in mind, so the default assignment of the left hand on channel 3 and the right hand on channel 4 will work perfectly with no changes needed. However, the scale exercise I just imported has the left and right hand parts on channels 5 and 6 respectively, which would explain those earlier issues we were experiencing with lesson playback. Fortunately, you can manually change the channels assigned to the left and right hand parts to ensure that the lesson features are monitoring the correct notes during playback. First, open up the functions list, scroll left to bring up Other, and press Enter. Scroll right until you see the 2 parameters we're looking for, the left part channel and the right part channel. Now, using the plus or minus buttons, you can designate one of the 16 possible channels to be monitored for that part. I actually specifically created this MIDI file for this tutorial, so I already have the insider knowledge that the proper channel settings are left hand on channel 5 and the right hand on channel 6. While I'm still here in the Other menu where I can continue to tweak the settings if need be, I'll quickly play the file to ensure the display features and part isolation are working properly. Everything seems to be fixed with my file, but if you're testing yours and it seems like isolating a single hand ends up muting both of the piano parts, you might have run into another common issue with imported files. The problem here is that your source MIDI file has both hands of the piano part recorded on one single MIDI channel. For example, if my scale drill has both parts recorded on channel 5, then selecting left-hand practice mode will mute all of the notes for both parts, making it impossible for me to properly isolate a single hand's part for practice. If that's the case, you'll either have to split the note data onto 2 separate channels using external MIDI editing software, or double down and flex your two-handed mastery by making do without the part isolation features, at least for that particular song. Assuming your channel assignments are working properly, the only other thing you might need to tweak is the phrase length value. I skipped over this during an earlier video on lesson settings, but to recap, the built-in songs already come from the factory with phrase divisions pre-programmed in, making it easy for you to focus on a particular section of a lesson by looping it repeatedly for practice purposes. However, when you import your own songs, you'll have to manually set the phrase length so that lesson mode knows where to start and end each phrase loop. To do that, open up the functions list, scroll left until the display shows lesson, press enter, and then scroll to bring up phrase length. Now you can use the plus or minus buttons to set the length of a single phrase in whole measure increments, with the default setting being 4 measures per phrase. My scale exercise is only 6 measures long in total, so I'll set the phrase length to 3, which will allow me to practice the ascending scale for the first phrase and the descending scale for the second phrase. Phrases are a great way to divide and conquer a piece during focused practice, but don't forget that you can easily create a loop on the fly with the A/B repeat function if you find yourself needing some quick reps on a tricky section. These settings can help you adjust lesson mode to work with imported files on the fly, but if you've got prep time and prior experience working with music software, pre-editing your MIDI files to match the default settings can save you the trouble of going back to the lesson menu to make tweaks every time you import a new file. This is especially true in a classroom setting where an instructor might prepare a large catalog of songs from different sources, all of which might come with their own unique channel assignments and structures. Recording and editing your MIDI drills is easy with notation software like Finale or Sibelius, and it can help eliminate potential headaches when a student imports a song file to use for lesson practice, ensuring your class stays focused on the music rather than the menus. On that note, we can go ahead and wrap up part 3 of this series, and I'm personally super pumped for all the fun stuff to come in part 4, which will be an ongoing collection of some more loosely structured videos showing off advanced multitrack recording tips and tricks. As always, remember to like and subscribe to Casio Music Gear for more tutorial content, and feel free to ask any questions you might have in the comments section. This has been Chandler Holloway for Casio. Thanks for watching.